What is up, lacrosse fans and sports bettors alike? We're happy to be with you here. It is another edition of the Bet On Lacrosse show. It's Dan Neubert at Newbie Talks here for episode 6, alongside, as always, the co-host with the co-most. It is Dougie Fresh, Doug Greenberg. Get him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. Doug, one of our favorite parts of the week when we get together and talk some sports betting in the lacrosse space. How are you doing, my brother?
Hey, I'm all right.
We could be better if it weren't for that goddamn best bet, which we will get into. But I feel you, man.
Yeah, it was a tough week for us. I think if anyone who listens to this show is actually following along and actually betting on stuff, you will understand that betting this league, betting this sport is very, very difficult. There's, and you know what? And we talked about it pre-show. It's a testament to the parity in the league, is that it's just so hard to actually get a grip on who's great and who's not. And, we're about halfway through the season and we still don't really know who's like the great teams. Obviously archers and whips are fantastic, but it's hard to really know like who's at the bottom of the pack, who's at the top of the pack. So, but I had a nice holiday weekend. There's that.
Yes, you had some good hot dogs, had some good burgers, got some good family time, and it's not all bad. We did at least hit and get some folks some money on the EMO segment. Atlas -1.5 cash in for me in that one. So nice little 135 payday on that, but The story of the weekend before we get into some wager woes here. And of course, this is Bet On Lacrosse. Will be going down each and every games. Maybe call this episode Hutton Lena Palooza, because while this might be the best slate of games yet, great games doesn't necessarily, Doug, mean great betting opportunities. But we'll go through with the fine-tooth comb. We'll get out the old Inspector Gadget, little micro, what are those things called? The fucking, what I'm talking about? Yeah, not the microscope. That's too scientific. It's the one with where it has like the glass. Magnifying glass. It's going to be a good show when I can't think of the word fucking magnifying glass in the intro. So that's when
just that kind of day.
Only up to go. And again, I think Doug kind of touched upon it there. What did we learn this past weekend in the PLL? We learned that we have a lot to learn, because you finally start maybe thinking some of these teams are distancing themselves from the pack. You look at an Archers who come into the weekend undefeated against the spread and undefeated straight up. And what do? They go 0-2, even as a 2.5-point favorite in a game. So I think we learned this past weekend that, oh my God, is the parity incredible? And oh my God, do you have to be more judicious than ever when actually taking money out of your pocket? Because while maybe the thought is, this is a new sport, we'll be cashing tickets hand over fist. This is why way back on episode 1, Doug, we reminded the folks, always be responsible when you're betting. Always know that even your most confident play, even a play where you place it and there's a 28.5 total that closes at some spots 3 points lower, and you say, oh my God, look at that closing line value. Even those kind of plays, even the ones that you think are your 401k can't lose bets, Doug, at least half of the time they're going to lose. It's just a fact in sports betting.
It is. I mean, I'll say, if I haven't said it every week, I'll continue to say it every week. There's a reason the casinos in Vegas are humongous and they're beautiful and nice, because this is how they make their living. And the folks who do this are very, very good at what they do. They've got mad computer models. They've got, not that bettors don't, but they've done this for years and years. They have years and years of data. And honestly, we give them crap, right? We saw this 28.5 line, this 28.5 total.
And I thought it was a bad line. I thought it was a bad line. You know what I mean? You look at that and you say it's the highest total all year. You look at the numbers and you say, well, Archers come into this game only allowing about 7 goals per game. On the other sideline, you have plenty of great defense as well. I mean, the number from all of the information that we have as bettors, the number looked like it was a bad number, and it ends up cashing that over by a half point. So credit where credit's due. That was a damn good number, Doug. It
was a great number. And that's the thing is, like, books are always balancing making a line that they know they can win while also enticing bettors. They want to basically push the limit as far as they can to entice bettors. And that's the thing. We fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. We were like, oh, like they knew that this game could possibly get to 29. They were well aware of that, but they had to balance that possibility of it getting to 29 with saying, like, well, how safe do we want to be? Should we set it at 26.5? Do we set it at 27.5? You know, those are still pretty high lines, but we don't know if people will jump at that because it might not be high enough to get under bettors. And they were like, you know what? We're just confident enough that this game is going to get 29 goals that we can set it at 28.5. We think people will take it. And that's again, that's why they're the best. It's why they, you know, it's why you see DraftKings name everywhere. It's why you see MGM Grand, gorgeous hotels, gorgeous casinos, because they know exactly what they're doing and they have it down to a science. So never underestimate the books. You know, the number one lesson you can learn about betting is if there's a reason the line the way it is, it's always too good to be, well, maybe not always too good to be true, but it's too good to be true a lot of the time.
Well, I will say, and I'll amend some of this quote, but after that bet lost, all I thought was,
I hate cursive and I hate all of you. I'm never coming back to school, never.
But just change that to I hate unders and I hate all of you. I'm never betting unders again, never. Because
you gotta put that in there. Put just little unders like right in the middle there.
Yeah, exactly. Do some creative editing.
I hate
unders
and I hate all of you.
Adding some more work to the already packed Hutton Jackson at Hutton Jackson. And of course, you can follow along with them on Pro Lacrosse Talk. He and Adam Moore are putting together a terrific roster of guests. You saw they're going to have Jeff Teat on the show this week. Awesome stuff, man. So
heard that guy's pretty good.
Yeah, he's all right. Yeah, some guy who's an international spy and also plays lacrosse. Yeah, he's all right. Josh Byrne last week, and they're going to be having Jeff Teat on this week. A terrific program, folks. If you're not watching, if you're not listening to it already, Pro Lacrosse Talk with Hutton Jackson and Adam Moore. And you can follow all the podcasts that we do on the podcast network here at lacrosseplayground.com, at Lax Playground on Twitter. Well, as we kind of mentioned, it was a week full of wager woes and, full transparency. Doug and I did our first double best bet with that Archers Whips game. We alluded to it there, the 28.5 goal total. That second quarter roll around. And for lack of a better term, Doug, I think the technical term is we knew we were fucked. Was I believe the technical term for it in scientific terms. Right after that, if you were in under better in the Chrome game, you saw another half point brutal win. And then if you look in the Redwoods-Waterdogs game, they were 1.5 point favorites. And we'll talk about this in the episode, just the fact that the Redwoods have just been notoriously bad this year at covering the spread. And they were looking like it was going to be another one of those, one of the bets that I had, as a matter of fact, having the Waterdogs getting the 1.5. Well, the 1.5 point favorites led. And then while they were running out the clock, it was only a 1 point lead. Not only one, how about 2 garbage goals to stick that dagger in my heart? It was a rough weekend. Yeah, it was a rough weekend betting for me. Still end up with my against the spread picks with a 3-2 weekend, so not too much to complain about. Leaving me still about a little around just a bit over 65% on the against the spread picks. I end up 2-2 on the best bets, 2-2 in the EMOs overall. So Doug, as the season continues, you and I are both going to look to just get above that 52% is what you're looking for to be profitable here in sports betting. And honestly, as we continue to bunker down, I think you'll see this week that maybe as we learn more about this league, the more that we're going to learn is the fact that finding advantageous betting positions, you really have to do some digging to do. And you and I were talking about before we came on here, that just because the newness of the league, maybe some of those databases that you go to when you're handicapping basketball or you're handicapping football or some of these other more established sports, not saying lacrosse fans that lacrosse isn't established. We listening to the pod, we doing this pod, love this sport. But as far as widely available information, Doug, which is what you want when you're betting sports, unless you're keeping your own records, finding some of these databases can be pretty tough to come by, which makes our job as handicappers a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and it's just a lot harder to spot trends, and it's something that you're always looking for as a bettor. Is you're looking for trends. You're looking for. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter in PLL, but if you're looking at baseball games, you're like, well, how does this team do in home games? How does this team do in road games?
Yep.
How do they do when they're catching this many points? How do they do? When the total is such and such number. And yeah, we don't really have that for lacrosse right now. If anyone's listening and you want to create it, there's a hole, there's an opening. Maybe our friends over at Flow Fantasy, that's their next project.
In between class and the biochem, they'll squeeze in some time.
Yeah, but this is all to say that you have to get a little creative when looking at your stats, and you have to maybe think about things a little bit differently. And as we talked about too, it's a lot more difficult because of the amount of parity in this league, it is funny to talk about parity in this league just because the first 2 years of this league were won by the same team.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they're also odds-on favorite after 1 week respite of not being the odds-on favorite. They're back as the favorite to win the championship. Of course, you're speaking about the Whip Snakes there. So a week-by-week basis for sure. Championships haven't really shown that exact parity, but we are 5 games in for all of these teams, so you're kind of being able to compare records a little bit more while not saying, oh, well, this one only had 2 games. Everybody's at least had a 2-game slate, and we'll be having some teams that are doing their second go around here on a 2-game weekend. But before we get into this week's action, worth mentioning what we like doing here, running down the ATS rankings, because you can go to Premier Lacrosse on Twitter, you can follow them on Instagram as well, and you can find the overall rankings for teams, but we like to rank them here on the Bet on Lacrosse show from their ATS records. So how about at 3-2 straight up, but the best team against the spread? They didn't cover week 1. They made it 4 straight games covering the Atlas. 4-1 against the spread. And I love to say that because I, from week 1, have bothered you each and every week, Doug, saying, don't sleep on this Atlas team, man. That offense alone, and adding Jeff Teat into the fold, one of the funnest teams to watch, and one of the best teams against the spread, or the best team against the spread. You have 2 teams sitting at 3-2 against the number, one of which is 3-2 on the year. That's the Archers, who had their first 2 losses, 2.5-point favorites and 1.5-point favorites. They lose both of those games outright. 3-2 against the number are the Arrows. Arrows might be going up, but those ATS numbers going down a little bit there. After being 3 straight covers as underdogs, Cannons are now 1-4 straight up, but they're 3-2 against the spread. They've been favorites in back-to-back week. They have failed to cover in both of those games as a 1.5-point favorite. They stand at 3-2. Then the whole slew of teams, 2-3 against the spread. So as you alluded to there, Doug, you want to be looking for some trends. You want to be looking for maybe some teams that have done well against the number, have done bad. Well, how about the head scratcher, Whip Snakes, who have the best record in the league at 4-1, but they're 2-3 against the number. You look at the Waterdogs, 2-3 straight up, 2-3 against the spread. Same could be said for the Chrome, 2-3 against the spread and 2-3 straight up as well. They could have covered this past weekend. Worth mentioning too, the Chrome, both of their wins straight up, those 2 wins, were when they were 2.5-point dogs. They won both of those games outright, and they're the only team. So they're probably saying, can you guys give us some more 2.5s? We seem to be doing really well, getting some W's when that's happening. Woods, the Redwoods are 3-2 straight up. They are 2-3 against the spread. They get off the snide 2 straight weeks as 2.5-point favorites, fail to cover in both of those with an outright loss to the Chaos being the second of which. However, last week, back back to a 1.5-point favorite, and they were able to cover that number. For what it's worth, the Redwoods have not been an underdog yet this season. Them and the Archers, the only two that can tout that. As Chaos, 2-3 straight up, 2-3 against the spread, but those two wins, those two wins against the spread as well, both coming in back-to-back weeks as underdogs. A 2.5-point win outright over the Woods, 1.5-point win outright over the Cannons. So there are your rankings. So without any further ado, Doug, let's get right into it, man. The tour continues, and they go to Minneapolis. There are a lot of lacrosse fans in Minneapolis. You got to add us at Bet On Lacrosse and let us know if you are a Minneapolis-based lacrosse fan. I didn't realize that was a hotbed. I like that they're kind of doing their rounds here, Doug.
We'll put it this way. Minnesota is sort of almost part of Canada. And this is my neck of the woods, by the way, because I live in Chicago. Yeah. I went to school in Wisconsin. Yeah. So I'm very familiar with this area. And I will say that Minnesotans, for better or worse, whatever you want to say, are the closest people I have found to Canadians.
So they're super nice.
Yes, super nice. Minnesota nice. So Minnesota nice is it's a real expression that everybody knows. And it's unlike any other nice. Like people from Minnesota, I have a lot of friends from Minnesota, kindest people, like genuinely care about your well-being, very, really good people. But as it relates to Canada, I'm saying Canadians love their lacrosse. So I'm willing to bet we got some Minnesota folks. A lot of hockey. It's a big hockey state, arguably the best hockey state in the country, who have transferred over their love of hockey into lacrosse or just have some Canadian blood in them. So yeah, happy to see the PLL make its way up to Minneapolis. It's pretty awesome. I'm excited to see how the crowds show out there.
So for not knowing that was the whole breakdown there, direct your hate mail at Newbie Talks. I'm ready for all of it. Friday at 8:00, another primetime game, and it should shape up to be a pretty damn good one. You got the Cannons at 1-4. They are 1.5-point favorites over the 2-3 Waterdogs. We're looking at a total 26.5. Doug, you might not be from Minnesota, but you're damn nice, man. Where are you going in this game? Cannons, Waterdogs, the Cannons 1.5-point favorites.
Dude, you are too nice.
Segues. That's all I'm good for. Let me segue the whole rest of the show.
Segues and like that last information section with all the ATS numbers. I was like just sitting there, just soaking it.
That's when I put on my like Point Dexter hat. You know what I mean? Like that's where I act like I can add without using my fingers.
There you go.
All right, I digress.
As long as you have it written down.
Where are you going in this game, my man?
All right. Well, I totally stepped on your segue now because you were saying I was really nice.
Yeah.
So great. I'm so nice. Here's what I'm looking at for this game. That was just an awful segue.
It's what we do, baby.
Anyhow, can I drag this out any longer?
Yeah.
I don't want to. All right, Waterdogs and Cannons. This is the game we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Waterdogs. It's just been such a tough, weird road for them. There was a lot of high expectations coming into the year for them. Dylan Ward has just not. It's so unfortunate because everyone had such high hopes for him too. Like not just this team, and he was a big reason why everyone had such high hopes for this team. And he's just been so not great, to kind of put it lightly. I wouldn't be surprised to them to turn to Charlie Cipriano throughout this at some point. I feels like they need some kind of change. They played a really high scoring game against Redwoods last week. But I don't know, Cannons too. Like it's honestly shocking to see that Cannons are coming out at 1-4. I think they've been very competitive in every game. Paul Rabel has been, you say whatever you want about Paul Rabel. You can talk about his age. You can talk about he rigged the league for his teams or whatever. Oh, he's only interested in the media. Like, he runs, he owns the league or whatever. He has been incredible this year. Paul Rabel has been fantastic, and he has really been the motor on that team. So again, it's pretty surprising to see Cannons at 1-4. I wouldn't be surprised if they won this game. Their money line is a little prohibitive for me. It's at -167. It's a little over the borderline of what I would usually do. I can't convince myself to take them on the spread either, though, because I don't know. Like, I just feel like Water Dogs are, I feel like they're due. And I might use this phrase too many times this show, but I feel like they're due. I think we talked about this pre-show, but the only 2 games Water Dogs won all season was when they played the double. Am I right about, or am I thinking about Chrome? No, I'm right. Okay, cool. So yeah, a lot of these picks that we're going to talk about, and I know for sure because I saw it all over the rundown, but the rundown that we have for the show, not my newsletter.
Check out that newsletter. It's damn good. Every week,
check out the newsletter.
Rundown.
But again, a lot of these picks are going to be leans. I don't think that I'm throwing down on this game. It's too close to call, in my opinion. But I'd probably be looking at Water Dogs plus 1.5 if I had to take something.
No, I'm right there with you. And I think, again, that's why, folks, just because a game is going to be on television doesn't mean that you need action on it. And this week, it's going to be one hell of a weekend for games. It's going to be extremely competitive. But as I said at the top, great games doesn't always mean great betting opportunities. So we're going to try and find you the value where we can, but I would be lying. We're all about transparency here. We give you the records at the top. We let you know how we're doing. We let you know when we lose. This is a very tough week to handicap because credit where credit is due. The bookmakers are doing a damn good job learning on the fly about this sport, and the numbers have gotten better increasingly every week. I think we saw that last week with the totals, that it was half-point palooza getting you stressed out. As far as this game goes, it's hard to have confidence in either of these squads, not just against the number, just straight up. I mean, the Cannons, they haven't covered, to bolster the point that you're making, in 2 straight weeks after 3 straight covers as dogs. Now they've gotten that respect from the books, and they're saying, well, when they're getting 1.5, they play these close games, but when they're laying that, they're not able to cover it. 2 straight weeks not covering those after 3 straight weeks, or 3 straight games rather, as 1.5 point dogs covering that. So they're especially head scratching to me, though, maybe even more than the Water Dogs. You just look at the Water Dogs and say that it's a team that, maybe they would be doing a little better if Michael Sowers was playing. A lot of cases could be made on why this team could be doing better, but for the Cannons, they have no excuse to be 1-4. I mean, they're second in points scored with 65 total. They're second overall in save percentage in a year when goalies like Kyle Bernlohr are even struggling. So, 55% in the cage. So the fact they only have 1 win seems like, to go with what you were saying, that they have to be due, right? Well, then you look to some of these other numbers and you see they're only 22% on the power play. When they get advantageous positions, they're not able to cash in on it. You look at the fact that when it heads to the stripe, they're dead last in the league in face-off percentage. You saw them try and address that this year by, grabbing a player who hasn't really seen much field time from the Whips in a trade, sending Hogan there for Reisman. So hoping to fill that void a little bit. But on the other side, the only 2 games that the Water Dogs won or even covered, as Doug mentioned there, was their 2 games set in Atlanta. So maybe for the Water Dogs, they just need to play 2 games every weekend. I don't know, but I'm not going to bet on it either way. It's a sheer pass for me. I'll lean the other way with the Cannons, using that it's due. I also lean over in this game just because it seems like every game, if the Cannons do try and win a game, they have to be scoring 15, 16, 17 goals to do so. So I lean with that kind of high total at 26.5. But again, folks, I'm not even putting pizza money on this. I'm just watching Friday night in Minneapolis and hoping for the best. We'll move to Saturday here, Doug, as the 4-1 Whip Snakes are back in action. They got off the snide last week, bounced back nicely with a nice win, and now they're going up against a team who should have plenty of motivation to take down the Whip Snakes, as the 3-2 Redwoods come to Minneapolis to take on the Whip Snakes. 6:00 Eastern time, this game. Total sitting at 25.5. No Rambo, no problem last week for the Whip Snakes against the team that was arguably one of the hottest in the league in the Archers. Now, Redwoods themselves, as alluded to, they bounced back with a nice comeback win over the Water Dogs. They could have rolled over and died when they were down 10-5. They don't. They fight back and get a very impressive win. The main thing that stands out to me in this one, though, Doug, is just how often are we going to be getting plus money on the whip snakes, whether it's against the spread or not? This thing opened -1.5 and about plus 110 if you wanted to back the whip snakes laying that 1.5. So I know that the Redwoods are going to be up for this game, which worries me and kind of makes me lean to them getting the 1.5. They haven't really covered as favorites. This is their first spot as an underdog, and we've seen how underdogs have done. But, the whips are still going to be without Rambo. I think, and I don't want to step on your toes here, Doug, with the whip snakes money line. But only laying 143, that's enticing because we're rarely going to see this whip snake. So, again, pure lean for me. I lean with the Redwoods just because they're getting points, and we've seen underdogs have done well. But I wouldn't be shocked if the whips continue to put a stranglehold on this league. Where are you going in this one, my man?
Okay. So as you've been talking, and I was listening to your points. I literally, in the time that you talked, I had something written down. I changed it to the other side. And then I went back to what I originally had in the last 2 minutes.
That's this week, though. That is this week. When prepping for this show, you can make a case for every single team this week. You could make a case for every single over-under this week, Doug. This is the toughest week thus far, which I'm hoping means it's going to be the best slate of games thus far.
Exactly. And this one is so tough. Obviously these two teams have a history with each other, having played each other in the first championship game, having played each other in the semifinals last year. I think it's going to be a pretty contentious game. Oh man, I think I might have convinced myself to go back on the other side again. Because all I mean about this game is I think it's going to be very close. I think it's going to be very contentious. I think that the Woods are catching whips at kind of the right time.
Agreed.
Oh, one thing we gotta talk about in this game too is the matchup at the faceoff stripe, because Nardella versus TD Erlin.
This is the matchup.
Right, exactly. And we haven't gotten it yet, I don't think, right? No, they haven't. This is the first time they played each other.
Yep.
And wow, this is going to be awesome. Like,
wait.
They're the two best face-off guys in the league at this point, in my opinion. I think that TD Erlin has already surpassed Trevor Baptiste. He's just been fantastic, and obviously Joe Nardella has been fantastic as well. That's going to be great. There's just no way to really comfortably bet this game, and I actually liked getting that whips money line -143. If you're going to money line,
you're never going to get that.
If you're going to money line this game, whips -143. However, I just think this game is going to be too close to call, and so I literally went back and forth on this so many times. I'm just going to go Woods +1.5. Also, only because A, they might be due, and B, I don't see this game being a blowout in either direction. I think it's going to. I mean, this leaves the possibility open for a Woods blowout, which I don't see happening because it's whip snakes.
Yeah.
But I don't know that whip snakes are going to blow them out. So I'm going to lean. I'm not playing this game myself either. I might have a play later for best bet in the total, perhaps, maybe. But for now, I'm just going to go Woods +1.5.
Now, I mean, when I was prepping for the show, I thought it was just going to be chalk. You see that you're laying under 200 on the money line to back the whips. And then you just thought about what you saw this past weekend. I mean, it is, there's no such thing as chalk in this league. And I think, it's a testament to these teams. On your point with the face-off stripe, I can't wait. I mean, that's the game inside the game. It's going to be, you don't go to the bathroom or anything like that because you don't want to miss any of these face-offs with two Rams just going at it. What I will say on the Trevor Baptiste side of things, I think TD Erlin, and I think it's just because he's a rookie yet, he hasn't really gotten his feet under him, but we kind of saw this a little bit even when he was playing college ball, was, he's incredible at the face-off part of it, but as far as a complete player, I would maybe argue that, Nardog and Baptiste still have a little bit of a leg up on TD Erlin just as a holistic player. Like, if they get caught in transition either way, they can hold their own. And not to say that TD Erlin can't, but it just seems like he's a lot less comfortable doing that. And I think that's just because of the fact that he is a rookie. You know what I mean? I think he has to get his legs underneath him a little bit more, because there have been some opportunities where he gets a pinch and pop. He goes down, he goes for that quick one pass. And you're seeing, a turnover the other way, or you're seeing nobody sliding to him where he could maybe take a shot going down Main Street. So I'm looking forward to seeing him bringing the rest of his game around. But as far as the pinch and pop, this might be the best guy we've ever seen do it. I mean, he's that good, Doug.
He really is. And you know what? I appreciate you bringing me back on my takes sometimes, because they get a little out there sometimes.
We like him a little hot. You know what I mean? I started off the whole entire show, the first episode, just dropping, screw you, Redwoods winning the league. You know what I mean? Like we like getting them a little bit hot. And that's where we come together and we rein each other in a little bit, except when we pull off the rubber band and go double best bets and lose by a half point. But we don't have to bring that up anymore. We don't have to. We have to distance ourselves from that. That was
by the sword, die by the sword. But
what you gonna do? We definitely died by the sword. That's for sure on the double best bet. 8:45, a late start here Eastern time, as the 3-2 Atlas take on the 2-3 Chaos. Another incredible matchup here. Atlas 1.5 point favorites, yet again, continuing to get that market respect. You kind of look at how they've changed against the spread in the odds makers view, and it's very reminiscent of what the Cannons have been doing. However, the Atlas have actually continued to roll, even getting in some of these favorite spots. Chaos, pretty darn hot, though. Got to give them credit. 2 straight wins, 2 straight covers, 23.5 the total in this one. Doug, since I bat lead off there on the whips, I'll let you get first crack at this one. Atlas Chaos, Atlas 1.5 point favorites. What is Dougie Fresh thinking this one, man?
I don't really know.
It hurt.
This one's so hard too. There's so many hard matchups this week. And a big factor in this one, which we have to bring up, is the fact that Jack Concannon's going to be out for the foreseeable future. And obviously this is going to be the Atlas's first game without him. Concannon's an interesting goalie because sometimes he plays down very much. He's not he can let in a few goals. He's a little bit inconsistent, and sometimes he just plays out of his mind and he's unbelievable. And here's the deal. I'm willing to bet that the sports books have built that into the cost of this game, right? Mm-hmm. And even so, Atlas are still being respected as decent sized favorites, which I think says something in itself. And this is one of those occasions where maybe the line itself is telling you something, being like, hey, we're well aware that Concannon's injured, but we still like Atlas as, pretty sizable favorites, minus 182 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 127 on the spread.
I think that's a bit much. You know what I mean? Like when you look at that minus 185 with a Chaos team that actually looks like they're getting their feet under them a little bit. My first takeaway in this one was just the fact that, I'm all for the Atlas love. I'm all for the Atlas respect, but I was surprised to see that much juice going their way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't completely disagree. It could, it could be a matchup thing. This Chaos defense is not known for being particularly stout. They've played all right the last couple of weeks, but I don't know that they've been tested as much as they could. I mean, granted, they stymied Cannons last week. I'm just looking through their game history. You could tell how well prepared I was. Yeah, I mean, they held Redwoods pretty low. I don't know though. There must be some reason here, right? And this Atlas offense has gotten very, very hot. Man, I wrote down Chaos on the originally just because it was another one of those ones where I was like, it's going to be close. But you know what? I'm now convincing myself that the line must be this way for a reason. And the Concannon news, I think, and another part of it too, is that early in this season, I have been reactionary on some lines, and I even said, I don't want to be reactionary, but this, and then of course I ended up being wrong. Yeah. So this one, I'm going to be the opposite of reactionary. And I'm going to say, again, not a game that I'm betting because it's too close. But if I had to, I'd probably be going Atlas -1.5 on the spread, only because I know that the books have baked in the Concannon news into this line, and the fact that they're still favorites kind of tells me something. So I'm just going to go with Atlas -1.5.
Now, we record on a Tuesday, but this feels like Freaky Friday because you're leaning Atlas and I'm leaning Chaos, because it's like we have switched bodies. It's absolutely wild, and that's why people come on in. So I guess I'll take Jamie Lee Curtis. You can be Lindsay Lohan in this analogy, man. in the Freaky.
Well, one of us has to be their brain, though. So that's the thing.
You're right. I'm kind of like an old soul.
Both of them.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the old soul, so I'll go Jamie Lee Curtis, but I'll be more than happy to hop into Lindsay Lohan's body. That completely works for me. Made me sound like Leatherface or something there, so I'm going to move on before I get put on a watch list. No Concannon for the Atlas is what just makes this a major question mark for me, because Doug, better than anyone, because you're forced to listen to my rants every week before Hutton, edits them down a little bit. Atlas are the hottest team in the league. I mean, it's hard to argue that. They're so damn fun to watch, and it just absolutely sucks that now they have this giant question mark at their netminder, because on the other sideline, or in the other cage rather, you have the best goalie in the league in Blaze Reardon. So this is also a team who's catching their stride. 2 straight covers, 2 straight wins for a Chaos team who started 0-3, who were looking like they were, just a little bit late to come around, maybe a bit of a hangover from that run that they went on at the end of the bubble. I lean Chaos, and the only reason is that question at goalie. Now, that question at goalie also makes me, I would pass the side betting it, but I think there may be, depending, I got to look at some numbers and everything, but later in the week, follow me on Twitter at Newbie Talks, because I think even with the low total, a lot of the time they're low for a reason. Chaos has been a dead under team as well, just because of that defense, really anchored by Reardon. But at 23.5, you think about a Chaos offense that leads the league in 2-pointers and 2-pointers converted. And you also think about the fact that what's Andy Towers going to try and do to a new goalie? He's going to want to pepper him with shots. You know what I mean? Instead of raking and kind of waiting until the end of the possession clock, I could see the Chaos kind of switching their game plan and being quick in transition and going and shooting real quick. And we already know that Atlas, once they get into that settled motion offense, they can put up 12 goals. They can put up 13 or more goals. So while this looks like it's a bit of a low total, this was one I flirted with for my best bet at that 23.5. You have a little bit of a question mark on goalie on a team that already had some question marks at goalie, because when Concannon's on, he's one of the best in the league. He's maybe the best in the league when he's hot, but when he's not, the story's quite different there. So this was already with Concannon in net, something that I would maybe look towards in over in this game, but I think a pretty decent case could be made for over 23.5 in this game, even though that line tells you it's going to be a low scoring game, Doug.
Yeah. And I don't want to disagree with you necessarily, but it's the thing about it is I'm now, especially after last week's fiasco, I'm now on the like low for a reason or high for a reason. We preach. I now have to practice what I preach, I guess. And it's a question mark for Atlas, no question. Not having Concannon in there, because their backup goalie is JD Colarusso, right? And he's another Albany guy. We don't quite know what we have with him yet because we have not seen him play. But he comes from the same pedigree as Blaze Reardon. So I don't want to assume he's great. I don't want to assume he's bad. I would personally stay away from this total. I think there's a decent chance it actually could stay under.
Okay.
I understand that these are 2 very efficient offenses too. It's that question. It's a question mark in goalie doesn't mean that I want to take the over. It means that I want to not do anything, me personally.
Beautiful. Because I'm glad you had my back there, because the last thing I wanted to do was bet a total this week. So I greatly appreciate you, Doug, because I think great points that you make there. and why we do this, why we bounce ideas off of each other, because maybe once one person really lays out maybe not so strong case for something, you're able to walk back on it, and we're able to put the minds together here. So I think a good pushback by you on that one. We'll go to Sunday here at 4:45. 2 games left on the slate, folks. Then we'll get you our best bets. We'll get you our EMOs, and we'll get you the heck out of here. We have the Chrome minus 1.5 point favorites taking on the Waterdogs. Stop me if you heard this before. 1.5 point underdogs for the Waterdogs taking on the Chrome. 23.5 the total in this game. Doug, I'll let you bat lead off on this one again here while I get some of my thoughts in sort here. But first game is a favorite for Chrome, and worth noting too, as we see them in their first favorite spot, both of their wins against the spread and straight up came when they were 2.5 point dogs. So now we see them as a favorite. Any angle you're looking at in this one, my man?
So this one is super interesting, right? So it's not only are Chrome favorites here, they're actually very sizable favorites. They're minus 1.5, minus 152 on the spread, which is a little crazy. That's especially for a team that, as you mentioned, their only 2 straight up wins were when they were 2.5 point dogs. So there's something really weird going on here. And I think that this is the books kind of latching on to this, teams who are playing 2 games in the weekend, kind of giving them a little bit of a handicap on that. And as it, so I actually, on a neutral field, like on a neutral field with no, differences in the, like, who's playing 2 in the weekend, who's not, on all things being equal, this line would have been a lot closer to a pick 'em. It would have been, Chrome minus 1.5 with big plus money. It would have been, the money lines would have been, minus 115 for Chrome, maybe. And in that case, I think I would have really liked Chrome. And I think in that context, I like what Chrome have been doing. And we saw Ryan Terefenko last week was fantastic. He's becoming one of the preeminent, defensive midfielders in the game, as we can already, right before our eyes. But as it stands right now, getting plus money for the Waterdogs plus 1.5, that's very, very interesting to me. Just from a value standpoint. And we mentioned it earlier, the only time that Waterdogs have won this year was both of the games they played in the same weekend.
Yeah.
So, they are used to this. They're experienced with this, and who's to say they can't do it again? So, I guess, like, it's funny. Literally my last 3 picks, I wrote down one team and I switched it to the other. And then I think I ended up going with my first one for the first one. But anyway, I switched it for this one from Chrome. I'm now looking at, again, not necessarily, well, we'll get to this later. Not necessarily playing this one, but maybe I will. We'll talk about it later. Waterdogs plus 1.5 is what I'm looking at. What you got?
Yeah, I think also, I've kind of been noting when teams have these double spots, because I wanted to see, the conventional wisdom would tell you a team has two games in the same weekend. They're going to struggle in that second game. As all the numbers in PLL, Doug, it's not really all that helpful, because teams in game 2 of the weekend, they are 4-4. So there's no discernible information there. I'll run it down. It was week 1 when the Redwoods went 2-0. They won their first game, won their second. Cannons lost their first game, won their second. In week 2, it was the Waterdogs in Atlanta, where they won both of their games. Chaos went 0-2 in their weekend. So they lost the first game, lost the second game. Week 3, it was the Whips taking on the Atlas. Whips win that game in overtime, and then they lose game 2, whereas the Atlas, they show that promise, they cover that spread against Whips, and then they start going on their run where they start winning. They won their second game. Last weekend, you look at the Archers, they lost. A little bit of a tough scheduling spot for them too, having Whips in that second game. And then you look at the Chrome, who won their first game, and in that second game, they looked tired, Doug. Like the Chrome looked tired in game 2 and looked like maybe the first spot where we said, yeah, this team looked like they played 2 games in one weekend. They lost the second one, leaving us with no edges there. 4-4, your trend in that one. So,
Can't tell us anything.
Yeah, it's par for the course. With Chrome finally being favorites, it makes me scratch my head a little bit. I think probably, as you alluded to, the only reason that they are favorites in this one is because Waterdogs are, they're struggling a little bit, but it is their second game of the weekend. But we saw their first time when they had 2 games that they didn't really mind playing 2 games. But now as the season goes on, a little bit more bumps and bruises. Who knows? Maybe that'll be a worse spot. Worth mentioning, though, the second game of week 2 was this game, was the Waterdogs taking on the Chrome. We saw Chrome as 1.5-point favorites, and we saw the Waterdogs get a 14-9 outright win over them. However, history does not always repeat itself. I think Chrome are playing much better. As you alluded to, Ryan Terefenko, easily the best defensive player in the league currently, and he doesn't even have a deep hole to do it with. Incredible stuff. A guy who's, from my hometown here, always loves seeing a Wilson Bulldog going on and doing big things. Well, I wouldn't, but it's probably won't make my light betting card this weekend. I'm going to lean Chrome in this one, getting that respect as the favorite, but you could easily make a case in Waterdogs, and I did make a case for Waterdogs, and then I deleted it and then changed it and then deleted it again. So sheer pass for me, and at 23.5, another total that I'm staying away from. So last game of the slate here. I'll be brief because I'm going to be talking a lot about this game after our break coming up here. Yeah. A little tease for you folks. Archers are 2.5-point favorites, being back to laying some lumber as they are 3-2. They go 0-2 over the weekend. And what do? They say, hey, make them 2.5-point favorites. They're that good, right? Cannons are the underdogs in this one, 24.5 the total. Surprised to see a total like that with these 2 offenses, but who knows? As we've learned, totals aren't really my best friend. Before I send it your way and before we run for a break, worth mentioning another little trend here for you folks. If you just blindly bet on 2.5-point dogs, you would be 5-2 against the spread. The only team worth mentioning, the only team to not cover when they were a 2.5-point dog was Chaos. And worth mentioning, too, as they're one of the teams in it, Archers were one of the 2 teams to cover the 2.5 when they're laying that lumber. Not only have teams been good against the spread when they're a 2.5-point dog, if you played teams getting the 2.5 on the money line, you're also profitable with some nice plus money plays. Teams have gone 4-3 straight up as the biggest dog that we've seen in PLL. With that knowledge and with another tough game to handicap, Doug, what are you looking as the Archers look to bounce back after an 0-2 weekend against the Cannons?
Okay, so for this one, I think this line is actually pretty much correct. And because I think that giving Archers giving -1.5 wouldn't have been enough. So them giving the 2.5, I think makes sense. And if for no other reason, I think it's because they are going to be pissed after losing both games last week.
Right.
And it's something you have to consider when you're handicapping games. Archers were the best team in the league. They were riding high. And everyone was saying like, wow, this team is like team of destiny, blah, blah, blah. They lose their look ahead game to Chrome by 1. They lose this big game that they were looking to Whip Snakes by 1. And I think that they're going to look at those 2 games, and this is a team of really talented players.
Good leadership too.
Right, exactly. And they're going to look at those games and be like, we cannot lose. All right, we're not going to lose this next game. So I think at the bare minimum, Archers are going to win. So then the matter just becomes, can they win by 3? And I think if you're starting with that baseline of Archers are going to win this game, and also the fact that Cannons are going to be on that second game of the weekend. Paul Rabel's fantastic. He's a little up there in age. He might be a little bit gassed. We don't know. There are some older players on that team. So if I don't think I'm personally going to play this one, but I do like Archers -2.5.
Yeah, and I think, even following up with Doug there, and I'll have some more thoughts on the other side of this break. But, I think, Doug, I think a lot of folks as well are looking at that exact same. It has to be a bounce back spot for the Archers. However, the Cannons, you could argue as well, their backs are against the wall. They have plenty of firepower on their sideline as well. And the one place where maybe you would say the Cannons have really struggled is at that face-off stripe. It's not like the Archers are make it take it. They only have a 46% success rate at that stripe. So if that follow-up has given you any inkling on maybe what I'll be sharing coming up here, you'll have to stay tuned to find out. We're going to step aside real quick here. We're going to hear from the great folks at Anchor, and we'll come back. We'll get you our best bet. We'll get you our EMOs, and we'll get you the heck out of here. He's Dougie Fresh, Doug Greenberg. I'm Dan Neubert. Stay with us here on Bet On Lacrosse. Welcome on back here to Bet On Lacrosse. Dan Neubert at Newbie Talks alongside the co-host with the co-most, Doug Greenberg. And Doug, it's everybody's favorite time. Thanks, Tina. Simply the best bet time here on Bet On Lacrosse. And Dougie, where are you going, my man?
All right. So we got burned on an over-under last week. We got burned on an under last week. And yet I am looking at under 25.5 in Whipsnakes and Redwoods. Like back to the well, maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. But whatever it is, what I know about these two teams, and I mentioned it earlier, this is a pretty contentious series between these two. They played each other in the semifinals last year. 25 points in that game. So just under this mark, right? Their game in the regular season, in the bubble, in the regular season that year, 24 points. Under again. You're noticing a trend here. Effectively, what I'm saying is that these two teams, they play very close, contentious games against each other. Neither one really wants to lose, and I don't think either one is going to go particularly out on a limb trying to beat the other one. I think that they're going to play it safe. They're going to play it smart. And this is why I was leaning on Woods plus 1.5, because I think that this is going to be a close game, but I also think it's a game where neither team is going to particularly take a lot of risks. They both have great defenses. So I'd be looking at the under 25.5 minus 121 at the moment.
Man, God bless you. I cannot bet unders anymore. My whole entire viewing experience was screwed up last week, rooting for that under. Every goal that was scored, whether it was the most incredible thing when Grant Ament literally killed a guy on the field, I couldn't even celebrate because I was like, oh my God, what about my under? Don't forget about my under. I've been giving you guys so much love this year, and you're not going to hit the under. Best of luck to you on that one, Doug. I might sprinkle just so I can sweat along with you, my man. So where Dougie's going, his best bet, my best bet, put me in an institution, folks. My best bet this week is Cannons plus 2.5. Look, I know the big storyline is going to be the fact that the Archers are going to bounce back. They can't lose another game. They can't lose 3 straight, right? Well, the Cannons, they put themselves behind the 8 ball as well, and they have to be looking at this weekend as a business trip, and they have done terrific as underdogs. They're 3-0 as underdogs. All the numbers say the Cannons have been one of the best teams this season, yet they're 1-4. Numbers can't continue to lie to me, Dougie. Give me the Cannons plus 2.5. Best bet for me, which brings us to our extra money opportunities. EMO time. And call me crazy, folks. EMO for me, Cannons, money line, plus 245. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, Doug. I know, the story. It's the bounce back spot for the Archers, but the Cannons, they need a bounce back of their own. Teams are bad in their second game, right? Well, the Cannons' only win this year came in game 2 of week 1. This weekend is make or break for the Cannons moving forward. So I don't mind backing Lyle Thompson and Paul Rabel and Brody Merrill to have their squad ready to go in the most important weekend for them thus far. Give me the Cannons plus 245 and give me a straight jacket too. That's my EMO. Where are you going, my brother?
You are brave, sir. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your gallantry on this one. All right. I'm looking at this one. So this one's a little interesting, and I'm going to see how Hutton interprets this for the video. Right now, I'm looking at Waterdogs plus 1.5. That's right. We're looking at an underdog spread here. Very, very bizarre. Because that underdog spread is currently plus 120 as I'm looking at it on Tuesday evening, right? You can get the Waterdogs to lose by 1 for plus money. And I already outlined why I really like Waterdogs in this matchup, especially, given their history of playing well on the two, granted it's a short history, but playing the 2 games in a weekend. I think the Waterdogs could seriously be on the up and up here. So I really like them at plus 1.5, plus 120. Now, what I'll also say is that if this line is, by the time we get to Sunday, if you are looking for a different extra money opportunity, you can also look at Waterdogs on the money line. That's currently plus 155 against Chrome. But I would, if you can get this plus 1.5 at plus money, I think it's a really, really nice play, especially if you're looking for a good plus money play. I think there's nothing to lose on this one. Waterdogs got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to lose. So I'm looking at Waterdogs plus 1.5, plus 120, or alternatively plus 155 if you need an EMO.
Ooh, I like it. That's Doug Greenberg, and that is a wrap for us. We want to remind everybody we have our Moneyline hotline up and running. You can call in. You can ask us for some betting advice. You can give us your most recent wager. Whoa, you rode on that under with us? We're sorry. Just visit the link in our description. And also, folks, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast, especially if it's on Apple Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Give us your thoughts on the show and let us know if any of your bets hit after listening to us. Your reviews, your ratings help us move on up the chart so we can continue to bring you the great program you've come to expect here from me and Doug. Also, as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button, share this pod with your fellow betting friends, your fellow Lax fans. Let's grow the community as we continue to bet on lacrosse and cash those tickets, folks. For my co-host, Doug Greenberg, get him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. I'm Dan Neubert, Newbie Talks on Twitter, and we'll talk to you next week, folks. Have a terrific weekend.